So with that said, let me start the show tonight. And I don't know whether Hank Priebus is here tonight. He just had his train show, and he may be a little tired and not able to join us. But Phil is going to do a quick tip and continue his discussion of the signage that he makes. So Phil, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jim. I had to get things right on my computer here. It just always takes a moment. So tonight we're going to continue kind of this discussion. I think, this really is kind of more of a discussion, quite frankly, than it is just a pure presentation clinic. Because one of the things I knew going into this was a number of you use these tools in similar ways I do, or different ways. So it's a great opportunity just to have a discussion about that. So what I want to do now is just talk a little about how to sketch in PowerPoint. And tonight's going to be a little different as a presentation because I'm going to only have a couple of slides. We're going to start moving away from using slides and moving more into actually, doing the presentation. So what I wanted to do tonight is start by trying to draw two different objects. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to draw first this crossing sign, and we want to figure out if we wanted to print that, how would we draw that to print these two arms of the crossing sign? How would we scale them, and how would we do that? The second thing that I wanted to do was look at how we would do a logo for our kind of private railroad that was designed around something like the Missouri Pacific lines here. So the idea is to use that kind of as not a prototype and try to do it exactly, but do something similar for maybe we're going to do the Central Pacific lines or the Western Pacific lines or something like that for our private railroad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the slideshow here. And what I'm going to do, I want to pull over here, just a new presentation. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put over here a blank presentation. This is a screen I'm sharing over here. And again, what we did last week, we want to go into design. We want to go into slide size. We want to go into custom slide size. And we're going to go ahead and do this on letter paper just because we can. I think it's easy. We'll leave it in landscape. But that way, if we want to print it, it's easy to print it out and look at what we've done. If I come up here to home, so the home key is where you want to be most of the time. If you'll notice on home, if I'm clicked on a slide, I can go to layout and I can get rid of these things on the slide by putting a blank slide template up. Just a really simple thing. So this is a template. Now, one of the things that I did was I went on back into when I was looking for this, and I found a sign, and we'll talk about how to find these things. But this is a sign schematic design I found online, which says, how are you going to build a railroad sign? So it says this should be 9 feet above there and that, but I really don't care about that. What I really care about is this right here. It says it's 48 inches for the length of the sign, and it's 9 inches in terms of width. So what we want to do is we want to build a sign that's that size. Now we really, even though there's a black line around the outside of this, we actually know that when we go to print this and cut it out, we don't want a black line there. So I want to think about that, because what that says is what we're going to build, we need to be able to figure out a way to cut it out and make it look good. And we'll talk about how to do that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put in the railroad crossing. So obviously we put in our caps lock, railroad, and then we've got some spaces, and we've got road on the other side. So that's our first sign. Now, we know how long we want that sign to be. So we're on a page here, so we've got to figure out on our page, and let's just assume we're going to print this 8.5 by 11. We're going to print this 8.5 by 11. How long does our sign have to be if we're printing it for, let's just do O scale because it's a little easier for me because I understand O. So if you know it's going to be 4 feet long in O scale, And we know we want to print that on a sheet of paper that's going to come out. It's going to be 1 inch long. So we want to make our sign 1 inch long. So if we look up here at the top, you notice we've got a scale up there. We can see that's probably going to be too long for that. So let's make it a little smaller font. So we come up here. This is your font control little window up here. Make the font a little smaller. Now, one of the things is when we do that, when we make it smaller, we may want to zoom in on it a little bit better so we can see it. Now, the other question that we want to ask is the font we have here for Railroad good for what we have over here? And you know, what's interesting is it actually looks pretty good. This is the Calibri font that they use. It looks pretty close, but one of the things you can do, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this today, and I guess I have the one that I did before that has this in it. I go look for it. But you know, you can go through all of the different fonts here and see if there's one that you like better. You know, I think Arial is pretty close on this one as well. You know, one of the other ones I found was, I think the Barlow was pretty good for this. The Barlow, and you don't want the condensed, you actually want the non-condensed version of Barlow. And there's some others. So we'll just pick one of them, because for what we want to do today, it's good enough to just pick one, and we'll go ahead and just stick with an Arial here. We want to do an Arial. We don't want to do a narrow. We just want to do either a black, or let's just do a regular Arial and make it bold. Or let's see what the black Arial looks like. Nah, that's a little too dark. Let's go back to just the regular Arial, and we'll make it bold. So we now have the railroad signage. Again, we've got to bring the sign down a little bit. So the biggest thing we've got to do now is figure out how to cut the sign. So the way to do this is actually really pretty simple. What you do is you make two boxes. And a box up here, this is the toolbar. Remember, we pulled that drop down. We got all those tools up there. The box is in my recently used shape. It's a rectangle right here. Choose a rectangle, and we choose that, and we come down here and we make a rectangle. Now, we don't want anything to print here. What we really want to do is we want to make cut lines. So the way we do that is we take the shape fill and we go no fill. You can do white, but no fill works fine. We want to make the shape black. You can do red here if you'd prefer. Why don't we do red, because it can make it easier to see what we're doing. Now, we want to make this 9 inches tall, right? So in O scale, we know that 9 inches tall, 1/4 of an inch is a foot. 9 inches tall is going to be 3/16 of an inch. So unfortunately, I can't do that math that well in my head. So what I do is I always pull up the calculator over here and go 3 divided by 16. So we need 0.1875 inches high. So remember how we do that is we click on this, use our right click mouse, we open the size and position, and we want to make the height 0.18. And it's not going to let us do 7.5, so let's just do 188. We'll round up a little bit for the material there. So now this is actually the width that we want to cut our sign, or the height we want to cut our sign to. Now what we want to do is just duplicate that, Control C, Control V. And now what we're worried about is the width of it. We know the width, 48 inches, again, an O scale reason for picking it. We know that's going to be 1 inch. So we go over here, click on this again. This tool right here is the sizing tool, and we make the width 1 inch. Now on this one, we want to actually make it taller like this. And now what we want to do is we want to put this over here. And we realize we probably want one more space in the railroad just to get it right out to the end. Did I put a space? Did I put a, oh, hang on. I think I did a carriage return instead of a space. There we go. Got it right now. Finally got it right. So now we just center everything. And so again, I'm going to pull this in a little bit closer so we can see this. And notice we've got everything centered. Because we're going to use these for cut lines, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size and width of these lines. Now, there are two ways to do this. Generally, if you don't know what to do and you click on an object, right click your mouse and you'll see something happen. And you notice we got a bunch of tools when we right click. Down here, we got the size and position. But you notice up here, we got some tools to actually edit the line. The other thing you can do is you can go into the shape format tools and you can edit the line, edit the shape outline, which is the line, go to weight and drop that to a half a point. So now it's really small. So now what we've got to do, we want to cut out the sign right on those lines. I think I need one more space here in road. What do you think? We put one more space in there and move it over and center it right like that. I just do it by eye because when you make this stuff so small, nobody's going to see a quarter of an inch difference. So now what you do is we've got to get rid of those red lines. So what we do is we pick the box again and we put a box, and I always start right about here and I go across to right about here. Now I'm going to move this out of the way because what I want to do is I want to click on this and I want to bring it to the front. Remember, that was a range, bring to front. So now I'm going to take this box and I'm going to move it back where I positioned it there to begin with. And now all I want to do with that box is do two things. I want to make the shape white and I want to make the outline white. And if you notice what I've got now, if you we kind of step back and look at it, is I've got a box where I can actually cut these lines across using these to line up my straight edge. So when I cut with a scalpel across, I'll get a nicely cut out box, exactly the right size, but it doesn't have black at the edges. Now, the reality is excuse me, let me get rid of this. We don't need that any longer. We can bring these in tighter so that you can print them side by side. Quite frankly, the other way you can do this that I often do is I just do two lines. By the way, it went straight because I heard the shift key down when I made it. So you do a line like this, you make the shape outline red, and then you just go CV and put two of them and do them like that. And then you just set the distance apart between them to put that in, but it's the same concept. So now what we can do is take this, get it down to this size, just group it, and now we can make another one. The second one, all we want to do there, you can either do one of two things. You can either ungroup it, or if an object's grouped, you click on something in the group, and we can take this and change this words to say crossing. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that the words crossing really didn't fill in the whole thing there on the words. So one of the things we're going to want to do is we're going to want to spread those out a little bit. I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to do two things to spread those out. The first thing is we're going to take those words and we're going to go up here on this. These are more of those text tools. And if you look right here, you see the thing that looks like centering? Those will center those. And then if you come down here to the bottom right of the text tools, you'll see this little sign signal here, and you notice it says character spacing. And you notice that you can actually add spacing to it. So we can make this expanded, and we can actually expand this out. And I'm going to go up a few points so you can see what happens. And you'll notice I actually overexpanded it. So now I got to go back and unexpand it. So I go up here, character spacing. Let me go down to about 3. Not quite enough. Just a little bit, always just a little bit of time and placement here. Yeah, I got over exuberant here. It happens to me all the time. There we go. So now I've got my two things to cut out for my sign. You know what I think we're going to do, just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and put the next one off to next week. So what I'm going to do next week is talk about the other object here that we had, which is the let me get that other object up, this Missouri Pacific logo. And so what we'll do is next week we'll focus on how to build that, and we'll just add another one on because I think in terms of time, I think I've used enough time for tonight. So back to you, Jim.
Before we go, anybody have any questions so far on what Phil did tonight? Or comments?
Any comments? Did anybody learn anything?
Yes.
Nope. Somebody learns. I mean, the whole thing for me is hoping that somebody's learning some new tricks of how to do some stuff you haven't learned before. Has anybody actually tried this in the last 2 or 3 weeks?
Yep.
Gone and played with it and tried it?
Yeah, Phil, I was actually just making signs for a hotel that I built today. I started out in PowerPoint, but I ended up doing it in Publisher because Publisher was giving me more exact sizing on some of my shapes.
Yeah, Ed, I
don't
just
know why.
used
When I
it.
would put it, the shape, when I put in my measurements for my shape in PowerPoint, they weren't printing out correctly. When I did it in Publisher, they were. So
Wow. Hadn't heard that before.
well, instead of trying to track down the reason why, I just did it in Publisher. It was easier.
Ed, I just did a sign in Microsoft Word. The difference that I do is I put in the box around the word box or the text box, and I actually cut the lines off.
Yep.
And
That's
I
another
cut
way
the
of doing it.
sign. That's
Yep.
that's an alternate. You put on the outside, top and bottom,
Yep.
and the two sides, which is even better because you won't even have to cut off
Right.
a line. But that's what I've been doing. That's what I learned this evening is put those boxes on the
Little
above
boxes, a couple of
above and
lines there.
beyond,
Yep.
below.
Yeah, anybody who's been in printing, we know of those as crop marks, and you live and die by crop marks.
Exactly. Well, you see them commercially, and it's just that's how you throw them in, and it's easy. It's really easy to do, and have white. If you've got a sign that's gonna have a black border, and we'll talk about it, you cut the border out and leave it on the sign, and then you blacken the edges, and we'll show you how that looks really good. But that's for black. For white, generally the side of the sign is white enough that you don't need to do much.
Greg, what's the cost of a Publisher program?
It's pretty much free if you buy a PC. Now, in order to keep it going and keep it up to date, you often have to get Microsoft Office Suite, which now they go to a subscription, which can cost you sometimes $100 a year, but you don't have to always keep up to date. It's very easy to get a Publisher and PowerPoint and Word. All of those come wrapped in the Office Suite, and you don't have to keep it up to date.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Cool.
All right.
Well, we'll leave it back to you. Bye.
And Phil, next time, then you'll do the other sign, right?
Yes, exactly. Because it just takes long enough. There's probably too much to do in one session.
Okay. Thank you.